Okay. Hi, everybody. Welcome to my podcast, Get Into It with Gila. I'm Gila Glassberg, and today I have Zahava List. Hi, Zahava.
Hi,
How are
glad to
you?
be here.
I'm so happy that you're here. I actually heard about you like a long time ago from some of my clients, and I interviewed Naomi Schulman for this podcast also, and she told me about you, and I was like, oh, I gotta get her on my podcast. So I'm so happy that you're here.
Thank you.
So could you just tell the listeners who you are, what do you do, where do you live?
Yeah. Okay, so my name is Zahava List. I live in Baltimore
Is it
right
list
now.
or list? How do we say
List,
it?
like shopping list.
List. Okay, good. Got
Yeah.
it. You live in Baltimore. Okay.
Yeah, so I have married with four boys.
Wow.
And yeah, so I was diagnosed with bipolar about 15 years ago. And it was really been a journey for me in accepting my illness, the label of it, and really come to terms with it. And about it's going to be 5 years now that I really felt my journey, like what really helped me was connecting to people who had gone through it and give me chizuk for it, and I could speak to them openly, and I know that they get it
Hmm.
and they understand, because it's a big difference when someone says, oh, that must be so hard, and somebody says, I get it, I know it's hard.
Right.
Um, and so I decided I had been in a 12-step programs in and out, and in one of the fellowships I actually started a phone meeting, so I knew the concept of peer support and outreach and being there for other people who are struggling with the same thing and sharing strength and hope. And I said to myself, originally I had seen like a flyer up there, in a public area that said that there was a phone meeting for women who have infertility issues. So I said, oh, there must be also some kind of phone support meeting for people who have a mental illness, like in the Jewish community, there must be there. And I really couldn't find anything. And I decided, because I have experience with phone meetings, let me see if like I could start something like that. And long story short, I ended up finding Naomi, as you
Hmm.
said, who's my co-founder, and Tamar Mishkin from Chicago. Naomi's from Rochester, Tamar's from Chicago. I was living in St. Louis at the time. We're all over the place. But we really, really connected to each other in the fact that we had shared experiences, and we also all had a passion of really spreading awareness, removing stigma, especially self-stigma, and
Hmm.
really getting together a support system. So in March of 2016, we launched our first phone meeting, and we started off with like 12 women. And now between our Zoom meetings and our phone meetings, we have like close to, 100 people coming on throughout the
Wow.
week.
Wow.
And it's really grown a lot. So yeah, that's what I do. I am the founder of Chazkeinu, and Baruch Hashem, we've gone further on, beyond just the phone meetings. We do all different projects and programs to really help the peer support and for people to really feel that they can be a productive member of society while going through the journey, and that they're
It's
not
amazing.
alone.
It's amazing. It's really incredible to like take something that you were struggling with and see like a void in the community and just like going for it. Like so I want to hear, I really want to speak about your organization, but would you mind sharing maybe just a little bit about how you how you were diagnosed, or did you was there any clue when you were a child? Like what was that like?
Right. So, when I grew up, like I definitely had mood swings, but like all within the normal range of, the only thing I had that had to do with, I had like a mild depression in 12th grade, where like I just didn't have motivation, and I was like just feeling kind of down. And I found that I had a thyroid issue, and I thought it was like, let me just
Hmm.
balance out my thyroid, take the Synthroid, and I'll be fine.
Hmm.
And then I really was okay. I went to seminary. I had a great year. I came back. I taught for 3 years. I ended up marrying my sister-in-law, who I taught their brother, because
Oh,
my
that's so
mother-in-law made
cute.
our shidduch.
So cute.
Yeah, and it was great. Like life was perfect. Like I was doing really well. I never, like, mental illness, I really had a stigma. Like I
Hmm.
really thought like those were people who were like on park benches and
Right.
insane asylums, and
Right.
I grew up in the 80s and 90s. Like it was just not a thing, to
Hmm.
really understand what mental illness is about. I didn't know anybody who was like living a stable, healthy lifestyle while having a mental illness. And so I got married and we moved to Israel. We were part of a kollel. My husband was, in a great yeshiva, and we had like really everything going for us. And Baruch Hashem, I got pregnant right away. And 10 months after we got married, after I had my first baby, I started showing signs of severe mania, psychosis, getting worse by the day. I mean, some people it takes months until they get to such a psychotic state, but for me, it was like within days. And it was very, very apparent, it was almost like being drunk without any alcohol,
It
or
was
being.
apparent to you? Was it apparent to you? Or it was just apparent to
No,
others?
I was really in denial. I thought everyone
Right,
else had a problem. I don't have a
right,
problem, and
right.
I was busy calling people, doing, saying things that I would never say in public, doing things that I never would have done, and not sleeping, not eating. I just had a baby, but instead of focusing on my baby and adjusting to being a mother, instead I was calling people and trying to kind of be their therapist and talk about their problems. And
Mm-hmm.
also at the same time, a lot of trauma came up as that things that I never thought was anything, really, like my subconscious was open and
Mm-hmm.
everything came out. And
Wow.
my husband was there hearing all the things that I was saying, and he couldn't believe that, like, I had all this stuff inside of me that I didn't even know about. So long story short, within like 10 days after I had the baby, I had a neighbor who was like kind of a mentor to me, who came into my bedroom, and she's like, "We got to talk." And she said, I know, and I'm hearing from your family that you really, something is going on, and I really think you have a postpartum reaction. And she's going on, and I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And she said, "I know this because I myself went through this after one of my children, but I ended up going to a psychiatrist. I took medication. I went to therapy, and I'm doing really, like, she was somebody who I wanted to be like, like she
Mm-hmm.
had everything. And she's telling me she has this, but like I just kept saying, I was in so much denial, and I was like, you don't know what you're talking about. Okay, very nice that happened to you, but this is not me. But she kept convincing me, and she's like, do you want to take, I was holding the baby while she was talking to me, and she's like, if your baby had strep, would you take him to the doctor? Would you, give him antibiotics? So like right now, your chemicals are not balanced, you need to go to a psychiatrist. Like, she was really trying to talk to me into that. Thank God, like, really part of my, I was so not in reality. The part of my like twisted thinking, I went for it. Like I thought I was, if this would happen, Mashiach will come, and whatever. It was really
Mm-hmm.
ended up being a big blessing, because I did get on medication right away, and I found a therapist. There's an amazing organization called Mitza in Israel that helps specifically with postpartum. They give you a mentor, they find you a therapist, a psychiatrist. They're just there, and it's amazing. They do it all volunteer. And they really connected me. And within, six, like a couple of months, I started really getting back to myself. I ended up having like 7 episodes in 10 years. And then after that, and it's been a lot of ups and downs and medication changes and hospitalizations. And I did ECT, which is electric convulsion therapy, to really help balance my hormones. So it's a pretty extreme case that I
Mm-hmm.
have, but thank God, like, bringing meaning to my pain and finding the right people and getting out of myself and finding people who I can help and be there for. Um, yeah,
It's
it's
amazing.
really been
It's
amazing.
amazing. So but you specifically said that you had like self stigma, right?
Yeah,
So when you like you're telling this over like this story in a few minutes, but it's over the course of a bunch of years.
yeah.
When it first like when you first like got diagnosed, was it were you like, no, that can't be, or how did you feel about that?
Yeah, like I did not want to be associated with, any kind of label or any kind of name like that. I had a lot of shame. After the highs, it always goes, the low comes right after that. And I didn't want to see anybody. I didn't want to talk to anybody. I had a lot of shame from what I did when I was manic.
Mm-hmm.
And I had gained a lot of weight, and I was self-conscious about how I looked. I just never wanted to go out. I didn't care about getting dressed and getting up. And I had been doing like a program, like to get a degree, and going out every day and doing all these things while I was pregnant. And then after, and working, and I had a great job and everything. And afterwards I was like, I stopped everything. I was like, I can't, like, I put my whole life on hold, and I just couldn't face the world. Um, And then, slowly but surely, like I couldn't even like be there for my baby. I was so focused inward and focused on the fact that I just didn't like, I wanted to kind of trade in my life. Like I don't
Hmm.
want this. Like this is not the way my script was supposed to be,
Right.
and I went through for a very long time like who am I? Like, am I Zahava? Am I bipolar? Am I like, who am I? And what I've come to realize over the years is that I'm Zahava and I have all the strengths and weaknesses that Hashem gave me. And I happen to have an illness called bipolar,
Hmm.
and that
Hmm.
came with time. It's not something that comes right away. And I think it's healthy to slowly come to terms with that, not be in denial that, oh, this is fine and this is okay, but obviously also try not to be stuck with it. And that's where, I did 5 years of inner child therapy.
Wow.
Um, and I've done all different types of therapies and all different types of modalities to help me come to terms with myself, come to terms with my past. And it's a journey.
Yeah. So just for listeners, so we could do like a little bit of education, um, in case somebody's like struggling or had something similar. It's usually triggered by like a life-changing event, like you said, like you had a baby. Is that what usually happens?
A lot of times it is trauma induced, which in my case it was,
Hmm.
and also the hormones after having a baby, and everything is like the hormone levels that go on from before pregnancy to after pregnancy. It's like a miracle when
Hmm.
everything. I always say like to be a bounce back mommy, like to
Hmm.
everything to
No
go
such
back to
thing.
where it was.
Yeah, no such thing. Yeah.
That's the thing. It's an adjustment for everyone, but like
Yeah.
in general, to not be completely dysregulated like I
Right.
was is
Right.
really a miracle.
Right.
And I feel like for me, it was like, it was just a matter of like having this big, huge adjustment in life experience definitely brought it. But there are people who it could be like their life is really, nothing really happened, nothing changed drastically, but yet they develop it.
Mhm.
And everyone's different in that way. But I think usually it happens during a change of life experience. A lot of times people who go to seminary
Mhm.
or, like there's a divorce in the family or things like that where when I had the baby and it's the most vulnerable, situation to be in. You're like completely opened up, with the
Mhm.
baby coming out of you.
It's true.
That really, like even during the pregnancy, even during the labor, there were things that I was showing signs that my labor coach was concerned. Like,
Wow.
what happened to you? Like, there was things from the very start that really showed signs of, something was off and something needed help. I needed that help. So but yeah, like it really is mental illness is there's different types of things that person can go through. There's some illnesses that are completely chemical based and it's like anything, like diabetes where the sugar levels are not okay and medication really can help that. But yeah, there's some people who because it's they went through a trauma and they can develop tendencies like let's say borderline personality disorder where certain things that they have a fear of abandonment,
Mhm.
and that comes from what their you know nurturing environment or lack of that they
Mhm.
grew up in.
Right. So after you had the baby, and you said it was like 10 days after you had the baby, you
Yeah,
decided that you were going to go for help.
yeah,
You got help. So
yeah,
you went to a psychiatrist. You are put
yeah,
on medication. You started
yeah.
seeing a therapist, and then
Mhm.
you said it was like about 6 months before you were back to yourself.
Yeah, and then after that, I ended up having a relapse shortly after. So yeah, it was a long process till I felt like I was really back to who I was, and it was a lot of up and down. Like I'm not saying I was completely out of commission for 6 months,
Right.
but the back and forth was less. The back and forth. When I say back and forth, I mean the times where I would feel a little bit higher, the times I would feel lower.
Hmm.
That would be hard. And then the medication changes because
Right.
sometimes
Right.
medication could cause side effects.
Right.
Sometimes medication could work for a little bit, but then not.
Hmm.
Sometimes it can make it worse than it was before. So like that's all part of it. And the truth is, as much as it's like psychiatry can do wonders, the medications can help change so much, but yet it is, trial and error.
Hmm.
And there's no guarantee that one medication that's helping someone, saving someone's life is going to be helpful for another person. And, I never have been off of medication, but yet I've had so many different episodes and instability that,
Mhm.
you know,
Yeah. So then you said you relapsed, and then what was it like for you being like in Israel? Like, did you feel like you had to go back to America, or you were able to figure out your plan of care in Israel?
so we actually stayed there for 6 years. So
Wow.
I did have a good support system as far as like like medically wise and with therapy. Like I had a great therapist and a great psychiatrist. I was with them for the whole, 5 years or so that I was, from when I was sick, and I was happy with them. It was hard though because I did get, my family did come in and help me at certain times where I was really not doing well. But it was kind of hard and helpful at the same time to be kind of out of my, especially working with childhood memories and childhood experience. It was helpful to come away from my hometown and be like thousands of miles away, because then I was able to look at things in so much more of a broader perspective and an objective way, which I think is very helpful
Yeah.
than to have to be constantly re-triggered,
Right. Totally. So, but you said before that you realized that there was like a lot of childhood trauma that did you actually forget about it? Because I know that that does happen. You
Yeah, I
had.
mean, what it really was about is that when we're kids and when we're growing up, certain things we think are completely normal
Right.
that are really not.
Right.
They're really not okay. And my therapist would say, when I would tell her things, she'd be like, that that's not okay. You
Right.
know that this is not appropriate. So a lot of things I had to come to realize that were really not okay, and they were affecting me till that time, till that day, affecting my marriage, affecting my ability, my cognitive abilities, everything like was affected by it. Some people, it's obvious, like the things that people go through. There's no question that this is something like catastrophic for the
Hmm.
child. But sometimes people grow up where they just think this is what life's about. But
Right.
for me, it was always put into my subconscious.
Hmm.
When somebody's going through something where like they're kind of in this like conflict where like, is this okay, is this not, but it's too hard to deal with, and so much dissociation is involved that it was only when my subconscious came out with the mania did
Hmm.
I all of a sudden things came to the surface.
Yeah. It's really crazy. It's so interesting. I'm happy that for people to hear this because
Yeah,
um I can relate to what you're saying a lot about like as children we don't know what's normal or not. We just sort of absorb the environment and accept that that's normal until
right.
we're old enough and mature enough to really assess if it is or not. And yeah, I've also had that in therapy where she'll say like that, that's not normal. I'm like, no, I didn't know that, and it's
Right.
like she has to say it over and over and over again because the childhood, okay, this is not therapy or anything, just from what I understand, it's like the child brain cannot say that what that person did is wrong. They can't.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
So my next question, which is like the $1 million question, is how did you decide to be open about your story?
So I had a different case. The fact that I was never really able to completely hide it.
Hmm.
When I became manic, a lot of people realized something was off and something was
Hmm.
going on.
Hmm.
And when I was manic, I actually would tell people, "Oh, I
Hmm.
have bipolar and I have this and I have that."
Hmm.
Like
Hmm.
so there was never a time where somebody completely, there's plenty of people who are going through this and like even their close friends don't know about it. Like
Hmm.
they're really able to hide it.
Yeah.
So I was never able to completely hide it, which was hard and easier for me at the same time. It was hard
Right.
because like I felt like it wasn't fair that that's how they're finding out. Like
Yeah.
when I'm not even consciously deciding who
Yeah.
should know and who shouldn't know. But at the same time, it made it much easier because it's like once it's out in the open, like it's such a difference. And when I transitioned to talking about it openly, it was a process. But when I look back at it, I feel like it's like a double test. Like not only you're going through it, but you're also trying to hide it.
Yeah.
And that's so hard because you're not getting any kind of support in a way that people could really like understand. Like the reason why you're not, doing A, B, and C is because getting out of bed is impossible for you. And even though no one could really fully understand unless they're going through it themselves, like there
Yeah.
there is something very freeing about someone else, understanding where you're coming from, and not like really trying to, it's such a big part of your life. Like mental illness, I mean, some people like it's mild or whatever, but like for some people like me, like it took over so much of my life that I can't imagine if I was trying so hard to hide it, how it would be. And I compare it to like coming into a room and you have a stain in your shirt. So like you could spend the whole time like trying to cover it up,
Right.
or you
Right.
could just be like, oh gosh, I have this stain, it's so
Yeah.
annoying.
Yeah.
And it's open, it's there, it's out.
Mm.
But it took time. It took time for me to, there were definitely people who, if they didn't know anything, I didn't want them to know. But the more I became accepting of my own challenge, this is just like any other challenge, and knowing that a mental illness is not any different than a physical illness, that it just was so freeing to me to be able to talk about it. And now I talk about it as if anything, and I'm
Mm.
happy that my kids also can talk about it, as if it's nothing. Like when I was in the hospital, when you're in the hospital, mommy, this is this, and oh, you're
Mhm.
taking your medicine, and like it's just like it's part of our lives. Like
Mhm.
Hashem chose me to have this test, but it doesn't mean that I have to give in to all the insecurities that go along with it. Doesn't mean I don't have insecurities, and doesn't mean
Mhm.
I'm like the most confident person. But coming to terms with it, and taking away that stigma, and my our rabbinical advisor, who's my Rabbi Shel Grossberg, has been incredible. And since we started Chazkeinu is when I started connecting with him. And one of the things he says, and I've really made this like my mission, is that the pain of a mental illness is unavoidable, but the stigma of a mental illness is avoidable.
Wow. Wow.
And I think that's so powerful
Yeah.
because we don't have to give in to the stigma.
Right.
We can't control the pain of it. We can't control the challenge that comes with it, but we can control the shame and the isolation that comes along with it.
Yeah. So, like you said before, like before you were struggling with mental illness, you thought of, people who like only people who are like on park benches, and you definitely had your own stigma about mental illness. And then when you went through it, still some self stigma, and now
Yeah.
it's a work in progress, but working on the acceptance. And just like there would be a physical illness, there's a mental illness. But
Yeah.
let's say somebody is listening to this and they're feeling like this stigma is real. Like how would you advise them to educate themselves, or to, start the journey of really decreasing their own stigma?
Yeah. So it's hard. I mean, I think a big part of the reason why it was hard for me to like understand mental illness in a way that it's not like, okay, something is really wrong with these
Hmm.
people, they're not normal. Because
Hmm.
when I grew up, I remember I was like, I don't know, maybe 10, 11 years old, and I had a friend whose mother was like, it was so obvious how unstable she was, and she did a lot of different things that were just really socially off. And I remember hearing somebody say, yeah, she has manic depressive. And like I didn't really understand. I was a kid, but like that was my first experience of hearing a label on a mental illness and seeing someone who was completely not functional.
Hmm.
And over time, like between me going through this and between meeting the most amazing people in the world who are going through this, like it made me realize like this people can be so like have it all together and seemingly like just so there and with it and everything, but also be going through this. And I think when people realize that this is, even to like educate yourself of what's going on in the brain,
Hmm.
with someone
Yeah.
who has mental illness, like realizing it's just like any other illness. I mean, there are people who have stigmas against physical illness,
Right.
like, right. So, I mean, people who are going to allow themselves to fall into the path of, that if I am not completely together, then something, I'm not normal, and like, what is normal?
Right.
And I always say, like, every Hashem created every single person. We're original. We're not supposed to be normal. Like what it, so if people define themselves by their challenges, yeah, they're not going to be considered, like the run of the mill. But if somebody realizes that, there's so much more to each person and everybody has so much greatness to them, and a person should feel to themselves, like really be in touch with what are my strengths? What am I able to do? What can I accomplish in this world? Even with the illness that I go through. And the people who really matter are not going to care. They're not going to,
Right.
hold you, make it against you because of your illness. Like,
Right.
and the people who don't, who are not going to understand and who are going to carry this, or, people have lost, I mean, I lost job opportunities. I've lost friendships because of my mental illness. But those experiences really just showed me that I need to focus on the people who really understand me and care. And even if it's just about opening up to the people who have it as well. And that's what, Chazkeinu is about. Like in one of our first meetings, I had someone come on and say, like, I've never said this out loud. And she said, I have depression and anxiety. Like she never had the opportunity to actually even say it out loud. And here she was comfortable to be able to say that.
Wow.
So it's not that a person has to aspire to be like me, where I tell everybody
Mm-hmm.
everything
Mm-hmm.
about me, because that's my coping mechanism.
Right. Right.
But even to find, just even if it's one person, two people who you can really talk to about it, and say it without any shame there, it's really, really freeing. It really is. And some people help them to write it on social media, where they're writing. They don't have to see people's reactions. They're
Yeah.
just, everybody's different in that way, and their adjustment to it. Yeah.
Yeah, that really that makes a lot of sense. I'm happy that people are going to hear this, and that it also makes sense that you said like not everyone has to share like you're sharing. I know like for me, like when I remember like you know a little bit about my story, but like my mother passed away very suddenly like 2.5 years ago, and it was just like crazy. The whole story was crazy, but I remember, should I post about it? Should I not post about it? How much do I want to share? And I remember like when I just wrote a blog about it, like maybe a year after she died, like it was so therapeutic for me. It wasn't like, there's a different, like, you don't want to, I wasn't oversharing. Like I shared the parts that I felt that I wanted to share. And it
Mhm.
was, it was powerful to hear, how it impacted other people and how it helped other people and
Mhm.
how it helped other people share. So I appreciate, like, I don't think everyone has to share. That doesn't work for everyone, but I appreciate your story. I appreciate hearing your story. I appreciate your openness. And I know from people in my circle how helpful it's been to be able to
Mhm.
refer to you and to your story.
Mhm.
So what was the feedback like for you when you did start sharing?
So, when I would share with the people who really just didn't understand, like, let's say there was a time where, but that when I was talking about that, I lost a job opportunity. I had been offered a job as a teacher, and the school found out that I had been in the hospital, and they said, "I'm sorry, I don't think it's going to be the best thing for you to teach."
Mm,
Which ended up being great, because I
right,
I might have still been teaching, and
right.
Chazkeinu never would have been happening. But I remember one of the parents like had found out that I was offered the job, and she was like, "Oh, I'm so excited that you're gonna teach my daughter." And I was like, "Actually, no, I was in
Uh,
the hospital, and I have this, and I have that."
wow.
And I could see she was like, "Whoa, I was
Um,
not expecting that reply," But the people who I found really like was therapeutic to talk to were the people who really were empathetic, and that could even be people who don't have it. It doesn't have to only be people who,
right.
but somebody who knows me enough where they know that I'm so much more than my illness. And
Yeah.
a lot of people really, really did, try to understand me, try to be there for me. And actually, I was at a wedding. And I think it also has to do with the fact that when I talk about my mental illness, I'm like confident. I'm like,
Right.
actually have something,
Right. Right.
so that makes people comfortable. But I was actually at
Right.
a wedding, and I spoke to somebody. I had just moved to Baltimore. We only moved about 3.5 years ago here. And she was like, "Hi, what do you do?" The usual question. So I,
Yeah.
tell people every time people ask me what to do, I actually start an organization for peer,
So
support.
this is your full-time job, by the way?
Yeah, I mean, I did tutor and teach over the
Right.
years, but
Wow.
this is my real thing.
Amazing. Amazing.
I'm home with my kids also,
So nice.
a lot of the time. But so I told her that I do this, and she's like, it's so important for people to have that support and not, be ashamed to share. And mental illness is just like any other thing. And I couldn't believe it. Like, this wasn't someone who also had it.
Right.
There are a lot of people who, like, random people who I tell, and they're like, actually, I had a postpartum response.
Right.
Actually, I have
Right. Right.
anxiety. It's so common now. Like,
Yeah.
what is it? One in every five people. And also, I feel like because of COVID and everything that's been
Yeah.
going on, where people have been so isolated, so much unknown and anxiety have been put into our lives, that
Yes.
I think at this point, everybody can understand what it's like to not be emotionally completely stable, you know?
Yes,
And so
totally.
I would think that that would make people even less judgmental, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And it happened to be that when I applied to for a teaching job here, I purposely put it onto my resume that I do Chazkeinu and this is what I have. And they asked me about it on the interview, and they saw that like I was talking about it, and I said because I can understand what it's like to go through challenge and making meaning from challenge and rising above challenge, I really feel like the next generation needs this, you know,
Yeah.
and I feel like that my experience in life and my illness can really contribute to for the girls. And not only did they like hire me
Wow.
on the spot, but they
Wow.
said, yes, like
Amazing.
that's true. We want that
Amazing.
for our students.
That's amazing.
So I think the slowly it is changing. I mean, it's a shift, especially for
Yeah.
people who grew up in a different generation than us, including myself. But I do feel like you know it's they are going to change. You know, the world is going to change, and the world is changing already. You
Yeah.
know, so yeah, definitely the responses have been very different over the years than it has.
Right. Now I think now it is, I don't know if it's more common, but it's definitely more spoken about.
Yeah,
And I'll make a plug for Project Proactive here, which is a website that is working on breaking the stigma in the from community on mental health. And
right,
I've written for them. There's lots of blogs there, lots of resources. And I just think that that's just like kind of really helping to normalize it. I
right,
also want to say that it's just like I'm like emotional because I remember like I probably said this on my podcast before, but I remember like a few years ago when like somebody would talk about like, you know, something going on in their life, like let's say like a loss of someone, and like you become so uncomfortable, like you don't know what to say and you don't know what to do, right? Because you don't really know what to do. And
it's
I
true.
remember thinking like, oh, this is super awkward. I have to like run away, you know? And then like
Yeah,
with my own really horrible challenge, and like I remember like in the beginning like bringing it, you know, talking about it because like this is my life, like I have to be able to talk about this, and just seeing people's
yeah,
discomfort and being like, okay, I guess I shouldn't talk about that because it makes people so uncomfortable. And then like uh, through my own journey and work and speaking to other people, I say this all the time, like my hurt is so much greater than your discomfort. You know,
yeah,
like not that we could compare people's pain, but like at least that's how I feel. Like I just recently went to pay a shiva call to a friend who lost a father, and it was so sad. And and I remember thinking, wow, like a few years ago, like I would really struggle to go, and now I'm just like everyone's sitting there, nobody's talking, it's uncomfortable, awkward, whatever, but it's like my discomfort is nothing compared to her pain, you know. And it's like
absolutely.
when you say like there are certain people that are very open about their mental illness, and um you could tell how people get like kind of like clench up and are like, oh, you shouldn't say that, or you shouldn't talk about that, or
Right.
whatever. And then
Yeah.
it's so not true, it's so not true, it's so much like I guess there's like that level of working on the discomfort, because like
Yeah.
it's there for a reason. But like
Absolutely.
we could, like I said before, like not to compare the pain, but like your discomfort isn't like anywhere near their pain. You know what I mean? And like
Exactly.
people should be allowed to share their story and share, you know, and it's true though, there are people that get it and there are people that don't get it. And
Right.
it's so powerful to have someone who gets it. And it's also so painful when someone doesn't get it. But like the
Right.
more you surround yourself with people who do get it, it's like you really feel like this is like doable, you know, like
Right.
even being able to make meaning out of it. I feel like that's where the opening comes from, like to make
Yeah.
meaning, because it's like it's so connecting to connect with people through our struggles.
Absolutely. And I think that that point is so important because it's on both sides of the coin, the person who's sharing and the person who's hearing.
Right.
And I would say, you know, there's different things to focus on when you are hearing someone share something like that. To remember that they're really being vulnerable and it's
Right.
really hard to open up. And let's say you don't know what to say. Like there are times where people talk to me and I really don't know how to help them. There's
Hmm.
nothing I can do but listen. And they say, thank you so much. You helped me so much. And I'm
Yeah.
like, what did
Yeah.
I do?
Right.
And so even just if you don't know what to say and you don't know how to react, like even to say like, wow, that must be so hard. I'm so sorry that you had to go through this.
Yeah.
Like, if there's anything I can do, please help, please let me know. Like, you're
Yeah.
not saying, obviously you can't say I get it, I've been there, I've done
Right.
it. Like,
Right.
really to just be empathetic, like I'm with you. I'm
Hmm.
not just like, oh, I hear you. Like,
Yeah.
I'm with you in your pain and I want to be there for you. And
Yeah.
also showing that like after they reveal this, like you still feel the same way about them. It didn't change the way you feel.
Right.
And I also think that when somebody shares, it's really important to kind of feel out the person and say, like, are you okay with me sharing this? Like, are
Yeah.
you, do you feel comfortable with that? Because you don't want to open yourself up to someone who's just not ready to hear it.
Yeah, that's true. There's definitely two sides to that story. Like, and I would even say, like, in my own practice, like, um people, share really, really vulnerable personal things, because when you talk about your relationship to food and your relationship to your body, it's really, it's hard. And I had a supervisor tell me once, like, even if in that session, like, you didn't use any tools or whatever, but you just like listen and carried their pain, it's so therapeutic. And I didn't really understand it until now. And I don't just mean in my private practice, because like, people say, like, once you go through a struggle, you really develop empathy, but like, those words don't do the experience justice, because it's so true. When you hear somebody, whether or not they went through the same struggle, you just really learn to sit there, and even though you kind of have a little knot in your stomach and you're like, wow, I have nothing to say, you develop this ability to be like, it hurts, like, it really does, like, I'm feeling your pain right now. And it's like,
Yeah.
it's very powerful.
Yeah. I think also what I had to come to realize is that my pain is real and I can validate myself. Like,
Right.
just because the people around me don't understand doesn't mean that what I'm going through is not valid and it's
Right.
not, real, and it's not, like, it's okay. It's okay to not be okay,
Right.
Like,
Right.
you don't have to be strong for everyone else. It's not
Right.
about that. It's a
Right.
challenge. It's something like daily challenge, and not, you know, they say like what other people think of me is none of my business.
Right.
Like it's
Right.
it's hard. We live
Yeah.
in a life where we're looking over our shoulder. We're making
Right.
sure people are okay with us,
Right.
and we want to get that validation from everyone, but we're not always going to get that, you
Right.
know?
It's funny because I just thought of this, like, somebody I know in my life. I won't say who, just in case they're embarrassed, but like, when they were dating, they went on a date with someone, with a guy, and he forgot his wallet. And I was like asking her, like, oh my gosh, do you think he was like a major scatterbrain? Like, what were you thinking? She's like, I was so happy that he messed up, because then I didn't feel like pressure. And I was like, that's such an interesting perspective. But I do feel like I also share a lot about my own struggles, and I feel like people feel comfortable to share with me, and probably with you, because like, I got it. Like, I get it. We're all struggling. And it's really so true. Like, when I first started my practice, I heard a lot of like therapists or dietitians or whatever say, like, you would never think, you would never know, but like, we all struggle. Like, maybe we don't all struggle with bipolar or depression and anxiety or whatever, but like, some people hide it, some people don't want to talk about it, and that's fine. But like, we really all have shared human experience of going through really hard things.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And life, a big thing that in Chazkeinu is about getting out of ourselves, not being so focused inward. Because if I'm living a life where it's just about me and my pain and what I'm going through, like it's just going to bring me down. And so much about Chazkeinu, we say our mantra is we strengthen ourselves by strengthening each other. And really picking up the phone. And I learned this really from OA,
Uh-huh.
like the outreach calls that people make. Like we do that also. Like if I'm having a hard time, I'm not going around and seeing what people could do for me. I'm
Right.
going around to see what can I do for others? Like how can I be helpful? And that is such an amazing feeling to know that like I can be there for someone else and then I automatically feel better. I'm not saying like that there's not times where I'm like I cannot be the one to give right now. I need
Right.
to find someone who I can take from.
Right.
But in general, like having that attitude where my life is about giving, like it's a big thing, and it's so important to teach our children that also that living is about. I actually wrote a song with my 10-year-old called "Living is Giving," And because I think it's so important for people, like as children, it's about me, 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 me. And the
Right.
generation, they say like the iPhone,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
generation. It's a really important lesson to really be able to get out of ourselves and be there for other people, no matter what's going on with us.
Right, and that's I interviewed somebody else for the podcast who struggles with borderline personality disorder, and she was talking about DBT,
Uh-huh.
and that's one of the DBT skills, right? Like,
Yeah.
helping others, which is like for some people really therapeutic. That happens
Yeah.
to not be something that like helps me so much, interestingly.
Yeah.
Um,
Uh-huh.
Probably for a bunch of reasons, but like I'm just saying that because I find that there's like some we like to compare ourselves to others and think like, well, that person does that. But like I have tons of other coping strategies that work for me.
Right.
That doesn't mean I don't like to give. It just happens to be like that doesn't speak to me as much.
Right. Yeah, for sure. I mean, everybody's different in that way.
Right.
But encouraging people to not focus so much inward also really, really helps. I mean, it doesn't mean you're distracting yourself from your own pain.
Right.
Feeling your feelings is incredibly important.
Right.
But at the same time, just not letting yourself run away with that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I would even say more than that, like feeling your feelings is sometimes really important and distracting yourself sometimes is really important because you can't
Yeah,
can't do, both of those things always. Like you have to figure out what works for you.
exactly.
Do we still have a few minutes? Because I wanted to ask you.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
So I wanted, if you don't mind for the listeners, could you talk a little bit about, you said for 5 years you did inner child work. Could you just
yeah.
speak to that modality of therapy, specifically when it comes to bipolar? Maybe that would be helpful for someone.
Sure. So inner child therapy is really going through, it's becoming the adult self of yours being there for your child, for the child within you. And for me, I had to go through, really what was going on for me growing up, what happened, really like listening as if I'm listening to a story from a child, but it's
Hmm.
me.
Hmm.
And it was a lot about nurturing that self, about mourning the things that I'm never going to be able to have. And it's still a process. Like, even
Hmm.
though, I had gone through it for so many years and went into other modalities, like, it's something that I have to carry with me all the time. It's something that empowers people, when I'm feeling unstable and when I'm feeling, when I get high, it's not just because of chemicals only. It's also because when life is so hard, I always say it's like a form of depression, but instead of being so in it, you're like running away from it. And
Yeah.
I talk a lot about when I'm high, I talk a lot about Mashiach and a lot
Hmm.
about because I don't want to be in pain anymore. And
Right.
that's what they
Right.
say is going to happen when Mashiach comes.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So what happens in inner child therapy that relates to the bipolar is that you sit with it. But at the same time you're nurturing it and you're giving it a place where you could open up and you could feel, but yet you could still be in this world and you could still function, and you are stronger than you think, because I felt like my world just like completely crashed down on me.
Right.
Everything where I thought was going for me was not going for me.
Hmm.
I imagined you know my marriage would be a certain way, and it wasn't the way that I imagined, and the challenges that came along with the marriage, because of what I had gone through. I mean, thank God I have a very supportive husband, but at the same time, the challenges that we went through and so much from my childhood, where I really reverted back to a child, and being married to an 8-year old, is not easy,
Right.
and being married as feeling like an 8-year old is also not
Right.
good.
Right.
And like developing the relationship, developing myself as an adult, really really helped everything, because I here I am being married with a child. Like, I can't be walking around as a child, but having a place in therapy where that child had a voice and that child was being nurtured, but from me, really empowered me, really turned me into, even though I have, so many days where I'm like, I just want to be taken care of, I just want to be pampered, I just want to be that child, I want that attention. I still like learning how to believe in myself and believe in that I have the ability as an adult to nurture my child, it's very it's living a whole new life, you know.
Yeah, the first person who taught me about inner child work, her name is Parala Abramowitz. Have you heard of her?
Mhm.
I
Yeah,
thought,
sure.
yeah. So I remember her telling me this once. She's like, whenever I'm in a session and somebody says something, like a client says something that like triggers her, she goes, that's when I imagine little Peril sitting on my lap, you know, and she says, like, whenever she trains people to work with adults, she first has to train them to work with children because every single person has an inner child in them. And
Yeah.
I just found those words to be really powerful and helpful for me when I'm thinking about my own, healing and other people's healing. It's really true.
Absolutely. And one of the modalities I also did a lot of is IFS, which is internal family systems. And it's very much about focusing on the parts of you that often you could be like, feeling very resentful. And then you're like, what's wrong with me? Why am I feeling resentful? Just stop feeling resentment.
Right.
What's wrong with you? What's wrong with me? But instead, looking at it as there's a part of me that's resentful. And a lot of times that's coming from a child, insecure part.
Right.
And then I have parts of me that are fighting that, and
Hmm.
learning how to be myself, learning what myself is, and not blending with those parts, but instead empowering those parts and giving them a voice is so self-regulating. I mean, it really is ultimately, even though I did it in therapy a lot and in a lot of different ways with psychodrama and with Santray, all these different things, it was all about really learning how to do it for myself,
Hmm.
you know. So there's a lot of different ways that a person can really be there for themselves and not rely, on other people. It's definitely difficult and it's not
Yeah.
easy. It's a lot easier to try to find people,
Yeah.
but sometimes it's just like it's looking for something that's never going to be there.
Yes, 100%. That's also been very healing for me. And what I teach people about, like, about the concept of self-care is not like just getting a manicure. It's like,
Yeah.
what are my needs? What's missing? And how could I fill that myself? Okay, so I know we're on a time limit, so I want you to just talk about your organization, Chazkeinu, in case anyone's listening and could use the support. How could they sign up? How could they find you? All that good
Okay,
stuff.
yeah, thanks for asking that. So Chazkeinu, first of all, the contact information to get to Chazkeinu, you could first check out our website. It's www.chazkeinu, which is spelled CHAZKEINU.org. Chazkeinu.org, and you could see the projects and programs we have. We have phone meetings, we have Zoom meetings, we have an online forum, we have peer to peer partner program, we have outreach, joining outreach lists, we have a davening group, we have a hotline, support hotline for non-emergency questions. We give out newsletter and chizuk emails throughout the week. So we do a lot of different things. And you could choose, I always say, like, when you're starting off, start with one thing. A lot of times people start with listening to the phone meeting because nobody sees you. You don't have to, you could remain completely anonymous. And then slowly but surely, I had people who like nobody wanted to know, like she didn't want anyone to know anything about her, and now she's like one of the volunteers out there, everything.
Hmm.
So it's a process, but so joining, we ask that you either call or email. So the email is info@chazkeinu.org, or you can fill out the contact form on the website. And also you can call, and I'll give the number. It's 314-346-7414. We have very minimal intake. We really just make sure that everybody is a Jewish woman who's either struggling themselves or with a loved one. So we do have mothers and daughters and sisters and spouses and everything. But then we also ask and make sure that everyone's in treatment, and and they know that this is, it's also for 18 and up. So once we know that, people don't even always use their real name. We want confidentiality is like such a important role for us because we know that not everybody wants to, people to know about them. We want people to feel safe to open up, and so it's a total non-judgmental, loving, warm, the way I don't call people members, I call people Chazkeinu sisters, it's Chazkeinu family. We're very much into connecting in that way and really building each other up in that way. And if you don't mind me putting in a plug, we
Please.
actually are having a fundraiser now, and it's a raffle sweepstakes through the Chafetz Chaim Heritage Foundation. We're trying to make 50,000. We're about halfway,
Wow.
and the deadline is next week.
Hmm.
So to get on. First of all, you could look at our on the website. You can look at our promo videos and see and hear from members and what we're doing, and Rabbanim and therapists. But the if anybody does want to give or know somebody who can give, that website is 100ksweepstakes.com/Chazkeinu. And we appreciate any kind of support. There's so many more things we want to do, that we offer everything for free.
Wow.
Everything's free. We really need the community support to be able to. We had to stop some things that cost money for us that we didn't have the resources for. So we want to restart some different programs that we've had, and we also want to continue doing more and more. Reach thousands of people. We're international. We do have hundreds of people at this point from around the world, and there's just so much more to do.
Wow. It's amazing.
Yeah,
I'll definitely put all that in the show notes for this podcast, and I'll
appreciate
put it on my
that.
Instagram, and I'll do
Thank
my best to
you.
share. And I hope that
Me
people will
too.
donate, support, and join if this is what they need.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, I definitely like that's ultimately it's about, being there for people who really need it and want it. And the family members I find is also like kind of a win-win, because they're learning. They first of all can connect to each other. A mother could talk to another mother, and that's really powerful. But more than that, they're hearing from people who are going through it, and they're like, wow, I can understand my husband better. I can
Hmm.
understand my daughter better. And it's really empowering for people to get awareness, to get exposure, and to get the support. You know,
Amazing.
so
Amazing.
yeah.
Incredible. I'm blown away.
No, it's like my life has completely changed. And I'm very lucky that I've had so many people guiding me and supporting me throughout the whole thing. We have a clinical advisor, rabbinical advisor. We've had different people who I've been able to connect with. There's a great, just the mental health community, Jewish community has grown so much that, there's people out there who really want to make this happen. Like you said, Project Proactive and refuathanefesh.com and all these different places have really changed the way that people could now understand more about mental illness.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for this opportunity,
Yeah,
and
it was
you should
amazing.
have hatzlacha with all your amazing work that you do.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Have
Have
a
a great
great
day.
day.
Bye.
Bye bye.